Because that's probably one of my all-time favorite albums. I've it came out uh, when I was in high school, and for whatever reason at that time in my life, the songs on the album really resonated with me. I'll just almost every song. It's an album that I can listen to forward and backwards, and I have no complaints. I love every song on the album. In fact, I even the re-release that they just did, the Wildflowers and all the rest was really good. Yeah, I could listen to that album over and over again, and it's one of few albums where I could do that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me for a return visit is comedian, podcaster, and all around great guy, Dan Bublitz.
Bublitz.
Bublitz. I knew I was going to get it wrong. Damn it.
That's okay.
Should have asked before I recorded. Yes, I know. My name is spelled Jessie all the freaking time. So I said, well, Dan, welcome back to the show. How are things going?
Good. Thanks for having me back. I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here.
Yeah. So for those of you who may not have heard your first episode, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm a stand-up comedian in the Midwest. I currently reside in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've been doing stand-up for the last 11 years. Also, in addition to stand-up, I also am a podcaster. I've got my podcast about, comedy podcast called The Art of Bombing, where I talk to performers about bombing and what they learned from it to get better at comedy. I believe when last we talked, I had another podcast in addition to that, which was a music podcast, but I no longer do that. I only did a handful of episodes and got to be too much at that particular time.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ready to start another podcast where I talk to people about stuff that they're interested in, called Submerged with Dan Bublitz Jr.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, it was your father's records, right? Where you basically were.
Yep. My father's
yes.
records was the
Yeah.
podcast, and what I was doing is I was listening to records from my dad's record collection
Yeah.
and kind of doing
That's
some
nice.
facts about the records and the time period and things like that. So,
Oh, well, very cool. Well, what brought you to the Twin Cities?
my fiance, her job brought us here.
Okay.
Ultimately, she works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, so she took a promotion that brought us here.
Okay. Very nice. And how has the Twin Cities treated you and your comedy stylings?
It's been pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, the Twin Cities has a pretty good comedy scene.
Yeah.
If you get out and go to the mics and stuff and the shows. I do a lot of touring, so I don't get it out as much within the city as I'd like to, because I'm on the road quite a bit.
Yeah. What's a circuit for you, Dan?
Well, I do a lot of stuff in the Midwest, but I mean, I'll go wherever they pay me.
Yes,
I mean, that's essentially it. But I do mostly the Midwest and the upper Midwest. So I do a lot of shows, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota. So I think I'm going to Ohio in November. So
it was back in 2018 when I had you on the show. I just did a really quick look. So how was the comedy business during the time of COVID?
It really wasn't.
Yes, I imagine.
A lot of stuff got canceled or postponed during COVID.
Yeah.
So a lot of what people transitioned to doing, more virtual
Yeah.
comedy and things like that. I put a lot of time and energy into my podcast,
Hmm.
trying to make that the production quality better. Getting, because I had to work remotely, I got a lot of bigger guests to do it.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have people like Louis Anderson and Chad Daniels come on my podcast because I was working remotely. So,
Oh,
um,
nice.
yeah, so that's how I spent the pandemic, just kind of working on that. And then I also go to school for marketing and business, so
Hmm.
I you know I had plenty of things to keep me busy.
Is there is there a s- is there themes in the stories that your guests have told you about bombing? And is there some common themes, or is it unique?
It depends on the story and the
Okay.
perspective of the performer. I mean, because that's the cool thing about that podcast is that I talk to people from, people who've only been doing comedy for, less than a year to people like Louis Anderson, who's been doing
Yeah.
comedy for 40 years. And so they all have different perspectives and, kind of their own unique look at it and how they
Hmm.
feel about bombing.
Yeah.
But there have definitely been some common themes, and especially in how to deal with the bombing, and I mean, the common theme is that it happens to everybody, and if you're not
Right.
bombing, you're probably not doing comedy correctly.
The idea, right, is you've got to go out there and try different stuff and see. I
Yep.
don't know what you felt about the HBO show Hacks. I don't know if you've seen it or.
I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
I liked it a
Um,
lot too. Now I always worry. I always think I have a really good friend who spent 2 tours in the Navy as a submariner, and so every movie that features a submarine he can't watch because they have so much crap wrong, right? And so I always think of that. I, who've never done stand up, um, liked the two characters and the creative process, right? The idea of, and so I enjoyed it, but I was almost reluctant to bring it up. It's like, oh, that piece of shit, Jesse. They got everything wrong.
I know. I thought it was well done, and I like the two different perspectives and angles on how they. I mean, and you do see that in comedy a lot, where you have
Yeah,
old time. There are old timers, or like road dogs and veteran comics that
yeah,
they have their way of doing it, and that's the only way to do it, or they haven't
right,
changed their act in 20 years, but they don't care because they're still getting booked. And
right.
then you do see young, new perspectives and how they view the older generations. So
Yeah,
I thought I thought they did a good job of capturing that.
yeah.
Um, and I thought, you know, aside from that, I thought it was a cool angle where not only did they capture them perspectives, but making them work together.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that their interaction between, because it's very clear that Jean Smart character is very successful. She's really good at what she does. And slowly, and she sees something in this young writer that, in this, the idea, right, the conflict of personalities helps. I'm always fascinated by the creative process, and I think they
Mhm.
did a pretty good job of showing that. And then they, the younger character, right, keeps shooting herself in the foot. So
Yep.
it will be interesting. And I just, well, I'm glad to hear that. I was really glad for Jean Smart, because she's amazing, and she had a pretty good year. She was really good in Mayor of Easton, and then last year with Watchmen, she was just superior.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was not surprised that she won the Emmy for
yeah,
that.
yeah, I wouldn't either. You also mentioned in the notes that you just recorded a new album. You want to talk a
Yeah,
little bit
I
about
did.
that?
Yep. Yeah, so I just recorded a comedy album. I haven't got a release date yet because we
Okay.
just recorded it at the end of August. So it's been about a month now. But
Hmm.
yeah, I recorded a comedy album in my basement, actually.
Oh, how
Um,
funny.
and the project is called Strangers in My Basement. That's gonna be the name of the album.
Okay.
And yeah, I had people. I turned my basement into like a comedy club, and I did shows down there, and I recorded them for an album. I did two shows, and I had good turnout on both of them. So I'm excited to get that. I have somebody doing the editing and the mixing and stuff, and I'm kind of dropping the ball on that because I need to go back and listen to it and cut up the tracks and tell my editor give my editor some notes. But I digress on that. But yeah, but it was cool. It was something different. I wanted to do something that wasn't traditional as far
Hmm.
as just going to a comedy club and recording an album. I thought I would do something different, and it was fun, because I did do it at my house, and some of the people I knew, but a lot of the people I didn't. I got heckled by my cat. He came downstairs and was still in the show, and like funny things like that happened during the show, which added to the experience. And now I'm going to be doing other shows in my basement too because
Oh,
I've
how
got it
fun.
set up that I can do shows. I got a stage and full lights and the whole nine yards. So
Very cool. Um, yeah, I guess you're almost doing like a bootleg. This is, recording it, except it's going to be professionally done, but it almost like the basement tapes or that's pretty
yeah,
cool.
yep. Well, and that's kind of the inspiration was like the old school comedy party albums, like the
Right.
house party albums. That was kind of the inspiration behind it.
Mm, very cool. Well, that's nice. Um, so all right, you talked about that one of the things you wanted to mention is Tom Petty's Wildfires album. So why did you want to talk about that?
Because that's probably one of my all-time favorite albums.
Okay.
I've it came out when I was in high school, and for whatever reason at that time in my life, the songs on the album really resonated with me. I'll just almost every song. It's an album that I can listen to
Hmm.
forward and backwards, and I have no complaints. I love every song on the album. In fact, I even the re-release that they just did, the Wildflowers and all the rest, was really good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I could listen to that album over and over again, and it's one of few albums where I could do that.
Yeah. There sometimes there's something really special about an album that um just speaks to you and you enjoy listening to.
Hmm.
And so very cool. Can can you articulate why this speaks to you so much, Dan? Why you love it?
I don't. I mean, I feel like some of it was just at a time in my life where like where I kind of felt alone,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
it
And a
does.
lot of the songs kind of were about loneliness,
Hmm.
you know. Particular like "It's Good to Be King." That was a really good example of that.
Yeah,
Where he's talking about being king, but it's still lonely because you're by yourself and you're in
yeah.
and things like that. So there was a lot of that on it. And when I was younger, and I mean I still am, even though I'm a comedian, and that to be a comedian you got to have a thick skin or whatever they say. I'm still very sensitive, and I was always big into writing poetry,
Hmm.
and I've had always had more of a sensitive side to me, and this album just really resonated with that to me. It was very poetic. Um, and it really just, like I said, a lot of it had to just do with where I was in life. I mean, I was like 16, 15 or 16 years old when it came out,
Hmm.
and I just loved it.
Were you able to see Tom Petty before he passed?
I was not. That would have
Mm,
been amazing. Tom Petty is one of my favorite
yeah.
artists. But yeah, no, I did not get to see him live, which is pretty sad.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I know when he passed, and I don't think we talked about this the last time you were on. If it are, I apologize, but one of my favorite stories, and I hope it's true, is that Petty was going to be on a show with Bruce, one of these, not necessarily no nukes, but something, and they told Tom, okay, be careful. Um, they're not going to be booing you. They're saying Bruce. And Petty supposedly said, "Is there a difference?"
That's hilarious.
And so either way, it's like, get the hell off the stage, so I swear, I hope that is a true story, because I think that says so much about just this sense of humor and everything.
Right? Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard other stories too like that where it seemed like he had kind of a sense of humor.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were in high school when you first got it. So did you anticipate it? Were you just like, oh, I want to get the new Tom Petty album? Or talk to me a little bit about how
I
you
didn't really
found it was good.
anticipate it because I've never really necessarily been like big like music, but like I guess music has always kind of been in my life because my dad is a big music guy.
Right.
I mean, he has probably over 2,000 vinyls. He's
Yeah.
CDs. Like I remember growing up and it was vinyls, then it went to cassette, and then
Hmm.
to CDs. And anytime technology changed, my dad, he jumped on board right away with it. He had
Yeah.
thousands of CDs, and then when MP3 players came out, he switched to digital, but he still has all of this music, all these cassettes, all these CDs, all these vinyls, all these things. So music was always kind of big in my life, but I wasn't necessarily keeping up with what was coming out or
Right.
whatever. And I think a lot of it was for me too with this particular one. It was because it was a solo album, which I thought
Hmm.
was unique for Tom Petty.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really anticipate it. It was probably more of a, oh hey, this is cool. He put out a solo album. Let's check it out.
Hmm. Do You talked a little bit about the loneliness and kind of the feeling that do you think that's why it's continued to resonate with you even after all these years, and why you keep going back to it?
I don't know about that now. I mean, I guess maybe a little bit. I don't feel as
Yeah.
lonely as I did then.
Well,
I
of
guess it's
course.
not even loneliness. It's more about fitting in, really. That's
Yeah.
where the loneliness kind of stems from. Because in
Okay.
high school, I never really felt like I fit in with any particular group. I was kind of a floater. I had
Okay.
friends in different groups or whatever, but I wasn't like necessarily in with the particular friends. Like most of my good friends now that I from grade school and high school, we were all kind of in that outcast
Sure.
where we didn't really fit in with any particular group, so we just formed our own group, if you will. So there's kind of that, and you feel that way too, like with comedy and stuff. In the loneliness, you're on the road a lot. You spend a lot of time by yourself in your car, or
Hmm.
yourself in hotels and things like that. Um, so I think it's a little bit of that, but I think more so it's just the nostalgia of bringing me back to when I was in
Okay.
high school. Like that's a lot of it.
Did um did you watch Kevin Pollak's documentary Misery Loves Comedy?
I'm trying to think if I did. I feel like I did, and it's hard to like remember because I've watched
Yeah.
so many documentaries on comedy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I did watch that one,
Okay.
but there's quite a few documentaries on comedy actually.
Yeah. And I know that um it it is it's that weirdness. I've had other stand-ups on the show, and we talk about how difficult it is. It's very easy for me to be considered funny at work because I'm at a work environment, and
Hmm.
I make a quick comment or something funny, and oh, you're hilarious, hilarious. It's the different dynamics of showing up on a stage, whether it's in your basement or in somewhere else, and the people are sitting in the audience like, okay, arms folded, be funny.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, they're immediately judging you before you even walk on stage.
Yeah.
And sometimes they make that judgment that they don't like you before you even get on stage, and it makes it even harder
Yeah.
to crack them.
How do you what are things you do to kind of get the audience on your side?
Well, a lot of it is all in just kind of how I approach the stage and
Okay.
how I approach my opening. And whatever my opener may be, I try to basically do icebreakers where,
Okay.
I try to give them a little bit of an introduction to who I am, and I try to, I actually got a tattoo now that it's kind of my comedy mantra that I try to
Yeah.
remember when I'm on stage. But three things that I try to do, try to remember, is to be present, smile, and have fun. Because if
Okay.
I'm not having fun, the audience is going to see that. They're not going to want to have fun. It's always good to smile when you're on stage, because if you're not smiling, you're going to look like a grump.
Yeah.
And you need to be in the room with the audience, because that's, the audience knowing that you're there and you're you know, seeing the things that happen, whether maybe it was a heckler from earlier or, you know, a you know, wait staff drops a tray of drinks or something happens and you're there and you acknowledge it. It shows, oh, it's togetherness. There, it breaks away that separation from, oh, you're the star on the stage and we're just the audience. It's
Right.
like, oh, we're all in this together. This is a group event.
Hmm. Do you how often do you, I'm going to use this in terms of music. Do you have a set or do you move it around and what you're going to talk about?
I usually kind of prepare a set list before I go up, but
Okay.
I don't ever necessarily stick to that.
Yeah.
Like I have a general idea. I always know where I'm going to start and where I'm going to end. What
Okay.
happens in between is, whatever happens. And a lot of times it is the jokes that I decide to do, but it's not necessarily the order that I wrote it down in.
Yeah.
Something might happen, and some of my jokes, it just makes sense to tell them at that particular point. So I'll go into that, and then I'll go back to the stuff I didn't tell earlier, and that kind of thing. Because I think that, that also helps with having the, trying to be somewhat loose and spontaneous, so you're not, because there's some comics, and I used to be this comic when I first started doing comedy. I wrote everything word for word, and then I basically just recited it on stage. I was so scripted, and that made me super tight and not very relaxed because I was more concerned on hitting every word correctly than I was having fun and delivering the jokes in a way that would make them even better. Um, so for me, yeah, it's a matter of just having a start and kind of knowing where I'm going to end, and then we go from there. And it also depends on the different types of shows I'm doing and like the times, like
Yeah.
at most open mics, you do 3 to 5 minutes. If you're doing a MC job, you might be doing 5 to 15 minutes. Features, you do 20 to 30. And
Yeah.
when you headline shows, it's 45 minutes plus. So that all has to play a factor in what I get ready as well. If I'm only doing a 5 minute guest spot, I'm going to do what I think is my best 5 minutes,
Yeah.
condensed.
So one of the things, as you were talking about your script early in your career, I think back to Joshua Malina from West Wing and Sports Night, and Scandal talked about that he was on the set of, I think it was West Wing, but there was the script came and there were two commas, and it was obviously a typo. And he mentioned, or it wasn't two commas, it was the word was duplicated, and he's like, this is wrong. And they went, we've got to ask Aaron, and so they were
Oh,
just,
yeah.
so and he's they call Aaron and Sorkin, and it's like, yes, it's what. Then they go, well, which one of the duplicate words should we get rid of? That they were so so like,
Oh
oh,
my God, that's
he is
funny.
so scripted, uh you know um And
And for a movie, and when it comes to somebody's movie or something, that's
yeah,
that's there. I mean, they wrote that piece of art, and if that's how they want it done, totally get that.
yeah,
And but with stand up, you can have it written to a certain word, but like I said, you end up concentrating more on getting it right than delivering it in a way that's fun and in audiences, when you're there in the room and you're being loose and unscripted and having fun and doing all the right things, the audience is going to remember that show more because it wasn't just a comedy show, it was an experience that they
yes,
experienced, live comedy experience.
yeah, I think so. And I think back often, about the clubs I've gone to and seen, and I and I realize this is, you sometimes have to separate the art from the artist, but a a writer that I'm a big fan of called Mark Evanier, um, had written for Welcome Back, Kotter, and he's show producer for Garfield and Friends. He's written all kinds of comic books, and he talked about going to see Bill Cosby way
Hmm.
before all the crap came
Oh
out
yeah,
about him.
yep.
And he talked about that he went and saw him 3 or 4 nights in a row, and he never could figure out when he went from just general kind of BS as he starts to his bit.
Hmm.
Like other words, there was, and in fact, he said the third time I was there, he recognized me and started even a different way. And he says, and all of a sudden I was like 10 minutes into him, like, holy crap, he's doing his set. Like
Hmm.
when did he move over to that? Because that's how smooth he was.
Yep.
And I think that's similar to what you're talking about is, you can go in there and you're talking and you're filling the room and you're kind of breaking the ice, and then you'll see an opening for, oh, here's a perfect time to tell this story or this joke, which will in based on their feedback, right? You can,
Yep.
they say Springsteen is that way. Like, he will change the set list sometimes because of the energy and feedback he's getting from his audience.
Yep. Yeah, and that I think that's important,
Yeah,
because it, like I said, it does show that you're in the room, you're paying attention to what your audience needs and wants.
yeah,
You know, I mean, for comedy, I mean, I one of the things I try to do when I open up is try to be immediately funny. That's
yeah,
the best way to get the crowd on your side, and
yeah,
because you're showing that you are funny and you do know what you're doing. So like within the first 15 to 30 seconds, I try to have at least one laugh,
yeah.
whatever the joke is, just because that's going to show, oh, okay, they do know what they're doing. This
Yeah.
is a professional.
So, not a comedy, but you I always think when you're doing a presentation, whether it's in business or anything else, you want the audience on your side. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget. I lost a really good friend of mine, Rick, and it was unexpected. And his widow said, I'd like you to speak at the funeral, Jesse. I'm like, okay. And so, and I was the last speaker, and the first one was really good, but the second speaker was amazing. She told such good stories, and she was just articulate and beautiful and just really, really funny.
Yeah, that
And
one,
so,
that's a real skill, just
yes,
in not just as a speaker, but in a speaking situation
right,
like that. Because I couldn't imagine
right,
trying to speak at a funeral,
yeah.
somebody like close friend or relative.
Right.
That's, ooh.
So I had more of a personal talking about, Rick. And so I stood up and I said, you know, Rick loved practical jokes and loved, giving his friends a hard time. And I think ultimately me having to follow Linda is Rick setting the giving me a hard time. And my son said, Dad, you got them on your side immediately because they laughed just like you did, like, oh, how funny. And then, they kind of set the like, okay, I'm not going to be as good as her. But it was a good moment. So I think that's incredibly important for us to do. Um, I'm just curious, I know how I find guests. How do you find guests for your podcast, Dan? And
Okay,
by the
so
way, we're going all over the place, right?
no,
Like
that's
I make
okay.
it,
I just wanted to let you know
yeah.
you cut out for a
Oh no.
second
Okay. Okay. How
on
about
my
now?
end anyway.
Okay. Can you hear
You're
me now?
back, but
Okay.
yeah, you cut out just a little bit.
Okay. Good.
I heard the talking. You said your son
Yeah.
observed that you had the audience on your side, or
Okay.
people on your
Sure.
side.
All right. I'll make a note of that. Um, so booking guests, how do you find people for the podcast?
Well, being in comedy, it's pretty easy because I usually book other comics for
Mm-hmm.
that particular show. Um, Sometimes I just post things on the internet if I'm looking for people, but a lot of times I just reach out to people that I want to try to be on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I live in an area where there's a lot of comedians, so I'll reach out to them. Or now that I do stuff remotely, I send emails and things like that. Not, sometimes people say no, and that's fine. But you're not going to know unless you ask, so I just try to ask. For my most recent podcast that I'm working on, I just posted on my Facebook to start, just to see what kind of interest there would be. I basically said, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is the premise of the podcast. If you have a particular interest in something that you would love to come talk about, fill out this form. And a whole bunch of people filled out the form. Turned out a lot of people were interested in not only, the idea of the podcast, but being a guest on it. So,
Oh yeah, like I would love to come on and either talk about Bruce or
mm-hmm.
podcasting or Doctor Who or anything at all you want. Yeah, because that would be fun. And and it I enjoy interviewing people. Of all I've done, and I still do a Doctor Who podcast where we watch an episode and then kind of dissect it. But by far, it's more fun for me just to get somebody like yourself on the podcast and then just go wherever the stories take us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's one thing I like about being on that end too, doing like the interviews and stuff, and especially with this new podcast that I'm doing, because for me, I'm learning a lot, and
Yeah.
that's kind of the idea. It isn't just about, for one, I get my guest gets to share something that they love and that they're excited about, which is always awesome when people can share what they love. And when there's a platform for that, there's no judgment. It's not like I'm trying to get people on to make fun of them or roast them or whatever.
No.
I generally want to know about what they're into and why they're into it, how they got into it, like all these things. So it's fun to interview. And I learn not just about them and how they got into this, but I learn about it. I've only recorded a couple episodes so far, but the first episode that I recorded, my guest was into indie nail polish. I didn't even know this was a thing. And it's basically artisan nail polish. It's basically craft nail polish. It's
Okay.
handmade mixed nail polish is what it boils down to. And I learned a ton about it. And while I'm not going to go out and get into it, it was still fun to learn about. And it was cool to see how much that guest loved talking about that and how much joy talking about this thing that they love brought to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that excites me. Being able to be part of that excites me and makes it so I even, the podcast is even more exciting.
And what's it going to be called?
It's going to be called Submerged with Dan Bublitz Jr.
When do you think you're going to start? Are you trying to get a
Yeah, I'm getting a
bank
handful of
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to get a bank before I release it. My plan is to release in November.
Okay.
I've got a couple already in the bank, and I've got a couple scheduled to record next week. And, so the idea, I'm still waiting on, I've got some friends that are in a band up here that are making me some theme music and
Oh, nice.
a couple things like that. So I'm still waiting for a few little things, but yeah, the goal is to start releasing episodes in November.
Oh, good. Well, good. What you'll have to email me, and I'm banking shows in advance too, so this will probably not come out till the end of October, 1st of November. So by then, I'll be able to say, oh, and this, we talked about this on the podcast, and it's now live and good to
No,
go.
absolutely. I'll send you the form too,
Yeah,
because
that'd be great.
yeah,
That'd be wonderful. That's super.
because that's the idea is to take a topic, whether it's fandom over a band or a TV series or just something that you're
Yeah.
interested in. I've got somebody hopefully lined up. They just want to talk about biology and science, and I think that's a cool subject. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually know about it.
Oh, that will
Compared,
be. Yeah, that
so it's all kinds of fun things.
I think that's a great premise, and I think it's interesting, um and you're right. It could be, because I've had different people that um love, every from John Hyatt to the Bee Gees to Leonard Cohen, and it's always interesting to hear them talk about the passion and how much they love that,
Mm-hmm.
and to kind of share that. It's interesting.
Oh,
Good.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that it's not limited.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to be limited to a specific genre where,
Yeah.
it's not just, it doesn't have to be geekdom or music or
Yeah.
television or whatever the fandom might be. It's like, I want to, whatever you're interested in, if you want to talk about it on the podcast, that's what I'm looking for, because I want to learn about I want to learn about part of it is learning about what they're into, but it's also about learning about people because that's really what I'm learning about,
Yeah.
how they got into it, what attracted them to it. Very similar to your questioning at the beginning of this podcast where you were talking to me about why I like that particular album and
Yeah.
why it resonates and things like that. And it's the same kind of concept, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. I I've thought about it, and I've decided that just this is. I had someone reach out to me, and Dave said, he says, I think you sell yourself short, Jesse. I don't think you do a Bruce Springsteen podcast. I think you do a podcast where you talk to people where the host happens to love Bruce Springsteen. And I said,
Yeah.
okay, I will take that, because I do enjoy other podcasters and talking to them and talking about, what's their concept and what we're going on. And,
Hmm.
last year I had someone who does a grief podcast and bereavement. And it was fascinating to hear her talk about that and all the different processes.
Was she
So
from Minnesota?
no, she was actually
Oh.
from the United Kingdom.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
interesting. Because I just know there was a woman um, from Minnesota at one point. I heard her on Mark Maron's podcast actually
Yeah.
because she has written books and stuff, but
Yeah.
did a lot of stuff dealing with grief and stuff
Yeah.
after. Did a
Mhm.
TED talk and all kinds of stuff. But
Oh yeah, no, this was Carissa. She was from the UK, and specifically um, with people of color and of other not necessarily uh, Christian or Jewish beliefs and the grieving process. It was really
oh, that
fascinating.
is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I really
That's
enjoyed
pretty
talking to her.
deep.
Yeah, it ended up being deep. And which was a nice change of pace, right? You can have.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, deep
that's
and
good.
meaningful can make a great podcast.
Absolutely. So besides that, what else you got going on? So you're going to be doing gigs in your basement. You've got a comedy album coming out. You're going to work on. You're going to have your second podcast.
Yeah, I've got a dry bar comedy special that'll be coming out next year.
Okay.
Projected date is July 2020, but
Hmm.
still a ways away.
Yeah.
Got that, and then I'm just always working on comedy, working on the road, trying to tour as much as I can and try to, make a living out of this career called comedy.
Yeah. I had a guy on early, and he talked about that he was from Australia. He moved to the UK to pursue a career in comedy, and like he moved like in March of 2020. It's like
Oh
whoop,
no!
just like damn, it just, okay,
Right?
let's talk about fun comedy, right? It's like, okay, God does have a sense of humor because I'm now in this new country trying to figure out how it's going.
It's
So
interesting. I actually think I think that person sounds familiar. I feel like they hit me up about being on my
I bet
podcast.
you they did. Yeah,
But at the
because,
time,
yeah.
I wasn't looking for guests because I got pretty backlogged on that podcast. Because that's the other thing. When you have a podcast that a lot of people are into, as far as being guests on, it's not hard to find guests. Like for my Art of Bombing, you were asking how I book, and a lot of times people reach out to me too.
Yeah.
So I get so far behind that it's like, oh, I just can't get everybody.
Well, I had a similar problem, and I may end up cutting this out, Dan, but you know, someone tweeted the link to that I was looking for Springsteen fans, and
Oh my God.
all of a sudden, and I have people booked like till November. And so I had to go into my calendar and like, okay, I need to not put only 2 days a week that I want to book, because I was like, oh, I want to keep it open. So I had, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, I've got 6 recordings scheduled this week, and
Suddenly you
yeah, like, it's fine. I like talking to people, but it is kind of, well, Dan, I'm recording, at the end of September, but it will probably be the middle of November before I get to your,
Yeah, right.
episode. It's that's just like, I'd forgotten all about that. So yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
no,
good.
I can totally relate to that. That's how it was getting. I've actually put my Art of Bombing on hiatus for a little
Okay.
while. I've been doing it for like 4.5 years. There's
Yeah.
over 200 episodes out there. There's plenty of content out there around it, but I just needed to take a little break and focus on some other creative projects, and that's why I'm really excited about this new podcast because I've got all the equipment and gear, so I'm not wasting it.
Yeah.
It can still use the gear, and I plan to bring the other my Art of Bombing podcast back. But it's been interesting because I've still been checking some of my stats on that podcast,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm getting more listens now that I've stopped releasing new episodes.
I have that feeling sometimes where it and I have just been able to put out 2 new episodes a week for a while, just because I've had so many people wanting to visit. And you see that, podcasts from 2, 3 months ago are still getting pretty decent downloads. It's because people start at the beginning or go back and hit. So, there's a lot of completists out there that want to listen
Yep.
to everything. And so, yeah, that's crazy. Well, good. Well, anything else you want to talk about or anything else you want to promote, my friend?
I think we covered everything. Unless you
I
have
think
any other questions for me
so. I
on
do
any
not
other
remember.
music stuff or
Did
anything.
did I ask you the Mary question when you were on the first time? I do not remember.
The what question?
The Mary question.
The Mary question. No, I don't. Maybe you did. I don't know. It's
Okay.
been for me 2018. That was a long time ago. I was
Yes.
a whole other person.
All right. So if you
So
if
different headspace. So I don't
yes,
remember.
if you don't know the answer, I can cut this part out. But what I've started doing, and I may not have been doing this in 2018. I end every podcast with the Mary question, and what that is I tell my listener in advance to go listen to Thunder Road, the Bruce Springsteen song,
Oh,
and
okay.
and then at the end of the song, does Mary get in the car? Because he
Oh,
says, this is a town full of losers. We're climbing, it's Mary, climb in. This is a town full of losers. I'm pulling out of here to win. And so it doesn't say does she get in the car or not. So, and that's the question I ask every guest. So do you know Thunder Road well enough to answer that? Or do you
I
want to just
do not.
okay, that's fine.
Unfortunately,
All right.
I've
So
probably heard the song, and I did not do my homework.
all right. Well, no, I didn't tell you in advance. So then
And I
when I
don't think we did this last time.
all right.
Truth be
So
told.
what I'll do, I'll cut that out. And then what I'll do is when you're ready to promote the new podcast, we may will have you on, or we'll set up some time for you just to do this, because I'm not going to put this out to October. So in the next week or so, if you go, hey, Jesse, I've got 10 minutes, I've got the answer, I've done my research, well, I can tack this on at the end.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
I can definitely go listen to it and give you an
Okay.
answer.
That sounds good, my friend. All right. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
The best way to reach me is my website, which is danbublitz.com, and that Bublitz is not spelled the fun way. It is Bublitz. If you put it in the fun way, I don't guarantee what you'll find. Or I'm on all social media platforms at D Bublitz Comedy.
Very nice. I will include that in the show notes. Dan, continued success. It is so great catching up with you. I appreciate you joining me. And yes, send me the form. That would be a lot of fun.
No, I absolutely will.
Yeah,
And yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
no problem. Talk to you soon, my friend. Listeners, you go get vaccinated. Let's stay safe. Let's be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you for everything, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.